Welcome to Couples Therapy in 7 Words. I am your co-host, Judy Alexander, and I'm here with my husband, Dr. Bruce Chalmer.
Well, hello, Judy, and hello, listeners. And you know, I'm not saying anymore hello, viewers and listeners, because we made a decision, actually this very morning, before we did this, made a decision. I'd been thinking about it, and then we actually talked to our son, who knows a lot about this stuff, and decided we're just going to go with sound because it's easier for folks. And, you know, it's not like our video was so fabulous that it was, you know,
Right.
it was super duper production
people were
values.
just listening to us anyway.
And people were listening anyway.
Right.
So, hello, listeners. Here we are, and our title for today is
Parents as Imperfect Heroes, an interview with DJ Stutz.
And we just finished doing the interview with DJ Stutz, and she is really a very interesting person, and we had a lot of fun talking with her. We hope you'll have a lot of fun hearing the interview. She's a early childhood educator and does a lot of coaching with parents, and we talk about those issues, and of course how it relates to couples being couples as well came up in our conversation. So we hope you'll enjoy that. In the meantime, let's put in a plug for, first of all, this podcast itself. We would like you to like us and rate us and share us and all that kind of stuff that you do in interacting with media these days, so as to let other folks know about it and just plain let your friends know about it. Our website is CTN7, that's the number 7, CTN7.com, CT, of course, for couples therapy, CTN7.com. And tell folks about that. That's where you can hear all of our episodes to date. This one is number 82, so we've had a few episodes out there.
We have.
And also, when you go to ctn7.com, you can acquire for yourself and those you love
Merch.
This is where, when we were on video, we would hold up our cups, you know.
Our mugs.
We have our beautiful Couples Therapy in 7 Words mugs, where Judy designed a lovely logo on one side, and then on the other side, it has the 7 words, which are
Be kind, don't panic, and have faith.
And so that inspiring message is there when you are having your favorite beverage, and it's a lovely way to start your day, end your day, be in the middle of your day.
And T-shirts, too.
And we have T-shirts, yes.
And they make wonderful gifts.
They do indeed. And I just, not that long ago, somebody who was talking with was saying, I've been telling everybody about your 7 words, and I didn't realize you have merch. And she was saying, well, she's got gifts for all the friends there.
There you go.
There's an idea for you. And let's also put in a word for the book that started all of this.
Yes, the book is called Reigniting the Spark, Why Stable Relationships Lose Intimacy and How to Get It Back.
And that book is available anywhere you acquire books. If you want to get a hold of the audiobook, which has proven to be one of the more popular, I don't know if it's the most popular medium. Anyway, one of the more popular media. You can get that via the Amazon site. I did the narration myself, so you get to hear me narrating the book.
It's also on ebook.
Also an ebook for Kindle. And, of course, you can get it in paperback anywhere books are sold. And I also am not above putting out a little promo for my upcoming book, which upcoming in a few months' time. It's not happening immediately. It's I'm working on rewrites now from some wonderful feedback I've gotten. But I will tell you the title. The title of it is It's Not About Communication, Why Everything You Know About Couples Therapy is Wrong. And I hope you find that's a provocative title, and we'll keep, plugging that until you actually can get a hold of the book. And of course, we'll have a great deal of fanfare when we announce that sometime a few months down the line. So, without further ado, let's turn to our interview with DJ Stutz, and we will be with you on the other side.
DJ Stutz is an early childhood specialist with more than 20 years of teaching experience. DJ has an immense love for children, with 5 of her own, 12 grandchildren, and 70 nieces and nephews. She fully understands the challenges and concerns that come with parenting. She offers parent coaching in group or one-on-one sessions to support parents in their most important job. On her podcast, Imperfect Heroes, DJ and her guests offer episodes whose subject matter is designed to help parents develop the confidence and peace to become imperfect heroes, raising independent, productive, and happy children. DJ, welcome to Couples Therapy in 7 Words.
Well, thank you very much. I'm so happy to be here.
We're very delighted to have you. So, kind of wondering, how did you get into working with kids in the first place? I mean, you mentioned you have come from a large family and you've got lots of grandchildren and nieces and nephews, but how'd you get into working with kids?
Well, I've always loved being around kids. And additionally, I'm the oldest of 7. My youngest brother was born the summer before my senior year. And I just have never had a time in my life where I haven't been surrounded by little guys. And I love them. They are amazing. They're learning, they're challenging, and I love a good challenge. And I'm just drawn to them. So
I can relate to that.
yeah.
I should tell you, I'm not a therapist. Bruce is the therapist, but I was an educator for many years. I was a teacher, a preschool teacher, a school principal. So
Wow.
I totally get where you're coming from.
And I've always thought, especially, I have to say that the kids, the ages of the kids that Judy was working with, I've always thought there's a special place in heaven for people who can pull that off. I mean, I love kids like that, kids in those. I mean, both of us have actually trained kids for bar and bat mitzvah. We've done that a lot. And, that age is right, like they're 12-year-olds typically. And I love working with them one-on-one, but a class full of them just fills me with horror. And I'm so impressed when I've seen Judy doing that. So I'm always impressed with people who are good at that.
But I also did the little ones too. I was a preschool teacher for several years too. That was tough.
Well, and I spent my last 2 years working with the district. I just retired in end of May, but my last 2 years I spent with the school district working in special needs pre-K, where we gave kids who needed that extra help to help them prepare for success in kindergarten. And what a joyful experience that was.
Yeah. I actually started my teaching career in a Tripoli preschool. So yes, lots of joys, lots of challenges, but more joys than challenges.
Absolutely.
And speaking of challenges, so what do you see are some of the particular challenges that parents are facing these days?
I think one of the biggest challenges that young parents are facing today are the absolutely wrong messages they're getting from society right now. And well, I think that we are getting to a point where parents really don't know how to, I use the word discipline. It's not punishment. Discipline comes from the word disciple. And when you think of that, it's someone who follows and a leader who is endearing and loving, but guides them in the correct way for success. And we have boundaries, and a lot of our young parents are having difficulty establishing those boundaries. And so, we're at a place where we're coming from these helicopter parents that a lot of our people grew up with. And so we jump in and want to fix everything for our kid without giving them the opportunity to try to work through and manage it on their own. Even if they're angry with another friend, or a friend took a toy that they had, or they feel like something isn't fair on a team or in a classroom or at the park, wherever, life isn't fair.
Yeah.
And so
I've
if
noticed
they go,
that.
have you?
Well, when we have grandchildren also, and I've noticed that when we've gone with our grandchildren to a playground and seen other parents of kids, and I remember especially when we were new at grandparenting, it's like, so it had been a generation since we'd been hanging around playgrounds, and it was amazing to see how little the parents seemed to be allowing kids to go ahead and work out their own issues. It's like everything was organized and they were constantly intervening. And I was thinking, oh boy, this seemed difficult.
Yeah, but this is what has been, they have been told this is good parenting. This is how you're a good parent. And so then now we're coming up with generations of um, young people who are now just now becoming parents themselves, and they really haven't had to solve a problem because the parents jump in every time. Even through high school, they're jumping in and wanting everything to be fair and safe and whatever.
Yeah.
And kids, so then we wind up with adults who don't know how to work out and compromise and come up with answers and get the give and take. Um and kids really need that opportunity. We jump in too fast.
Yeah. Yeah, it's one of the ways this is manifesting, of course, in the mental health world, is just this
Yeah.
spike in anxiety cases.
Yeah.
The kids who go off to college and can barely function because they are so thrown by anything, anything difficult, and
Yeah.
they don't, it is indeed difficult.
So how do you teach that hands-off approach when you're doing your sessions and coaching? How do you
Yeah.
work with parents on that?
Well, it's nice with coaching because the reason they come to coaching is they're wanting to learn something new. They're seeing
Mhm.
that maybe their kids are out of control. I've seen little guys, kindergarten, for example. This was about 2 years ago. I had a little kindergartner, and dad came to pick her up that day, and she wanted to play on the playground before they left. And dad said, "Baby, I've got a meeting. We've got to hurry. I'm going to be late." And it was amazing watching her go into control mode and pouting, and "You're not a nice dad." And the playground was right outside the windows of my classroom. And as the other kids were being picked up, I looked up, and there she was playing on the playground, and for about 15 minutes. And so, um, we need to be able to have these boundaries and say, "I understand that you're mad, but we got to go." And you can
Mhm.
be pouty and mad if you want, but we're going to go.
Mhm.
And letting them kind of deal with that, and not being afraid of kids that are angry or crying or saying mean things, because that's what little kids do. They're trying to learn how to maneuver the world. And when you teach them that you get your way by pouting and crying and saying mean things, what kind of adults do you expect them to
Yeah.
become?
Of course, we're a couples therapy. We're orientation. Our orientation here is toward couples therapy. It's couples therapy in 7 words. And I often think that same insight, and I want to be careful how I say this, because I don't mean that I don't think partners should infantilize each other at all. But there is a way in which, one of the things I preach about is that people need to tolerate anxiety in order
Mhm.
to be honest with each other. And sometimes the willingness to tell your partner something that you're pretty sure they won't like or may not like, but take the risk anyway because it's important enough, is a skill that a lot of couples don't seem to have. And it's very similar to the skill of telling a kid, "Hey, I know you're not going to like this, but we have to go."
Yeah. Yeah. And that's very true. I mean, I've been blessed. My husband and I have been married for 44 years.
Mm.
And, we're the one and onlys for each other. And
Uh-huh.
we've had some rough goes,
Mhm.
that's part of marriage too. And I think that when these kids grow up, and then they could have conflict within, and you're the therapist, but in my mind, they have the conflict within the relationship. Sometimes like, "Oh, conflict, we've got to leave, we've got to split up
Mhm.
because there's conflict," rather than, "I love you so much that I'm willing to work through this with you
Yeah.
you know, in
Yeah.
the
And
best." Yeah.
what I think it tends to be is panic. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
I've never met anybody where I would say they split up easily. Do you know what I mean? Where they just lightly say, "Oh, well, this isn't working, heck with it." Those aren't the folks who come to a couples therapist.
Right.
The folks I see are struggling with it, but a lot of times what they're struggling with is that panic that they have a difference, and it's not there's the trivial differences you can just laugh about, but these are differences that feel important, but they don't know how to work through it without panicking. And
Hmm.
it ends up feeling like an existential threat every time they have a difference that they can't immediately work out. And that's a skill. Again, it sounds to me like what you're telling parents is a very similar set of skills. It's like you have to tolerate the anxiety of seeing your child whom you love not be very happy with you for a little while.
Mhm.
And that is,
Or even
yeah.
go through an experience that might be hard for them.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe, you know, someone is being a little bit of a bully, whether they're at school or on the playground or even within the home, within siblings, we have that as well. But giving them the skills to be able to walk away, or, you know, to stand up for someone else who is being mistreated by another child. Those are skills that we're not innately born with. We have to be taught that. And so that's why, like with you and the families that come to you for help, they're ones who are wanting to make the necessary changes to be more successful and to make their family more successful. Just as with me, when I have someone who comes in with either group coaching, or one-on-one coaching, they're there because they want to learn how to do things differently. And so
Mm.
I think just that desire to learn gives you a greater chance of success.
Yeah, definitely. It is interesting that one of my career before I got into clinical psychology actually was a statistician. I got my PhD in psychology on the research side and then got the clinical training later. And so for a while I worked as a statistician, and you know, from my statistician brain, I always realized we do not get, you know, neither you nor I get random samples of folks. We get the folks who are actually interested in, you know, hearing from someone else, how might they change. And so you know, it's true. One of the privileges we have is to be invited in. You know, we are given standing with people to offer them, you know, offer them ideas, to offer them ways that they can reconsider their assumptions so that things maybe can go better. And that's quite a privilege that we get to have.
Isn't it? It truly is.
You know, the idea of parents as imperfect heroes, it's useful for relationship issues between adults as well. Tell us how you came to that, and a little bit more about that.
You know, it was funny because I have another company called Little Hearts Academy USA, and it's under that company name that I do the coaching and, you know, support in that way. And then I decided to try and reach out to a wider audience through the podcast, and I'm trying to come up with a name, and I'm running through things, and I was running through some of my ideals as you work to come up with a podcast name. And you'll know this is, what am I trying to express to my audience?
Mm-hmm.
And truly, I believe that nobody's perfect. And sometimes we, in all of our best efforts, our very, very best efforts, we're still going to be imperfect. There's nothing you can do about it. We're all going to, oh gosh, we're all going to be imperfect. And there hasn't been a perfect parent in the history of the world. And so, okay, let's let that go. And then, but a hero is someone, though, who stands up against an adversity. And sometimes our kids can be a bit of an adversity.
Yes, they can.
Yes, they can. But we love them enough, and we're strong enough to continue trying to do what's right for those kids. And so I look at those parents as absolute heroes. Are we perfect? Absolutely not. But I think understanding and not giving up because of those imperfections are what makes people heroes.
Yeah, I love that juxtaposition, because it's indeed, of course, we're all imperfect, and to recognize that, that to be a parent is to be a hero as well. I just think that's a beautiful
yes, it is.
you know, juxtaposition. And you remind me also of, you know, D.W. Winnicott's ideas of course, he would refer to it as mothers, but it's often been expanded to more generally to parents. The idea of the good enough mother or the good enough parent.
Yeah.
And as I understand it, he wasn't just talking about that, you know, you don't have to be that great for your kid to be okay. He was really talking about, if you're too perfect, you know, quote unquote perfect, that's not good for your kid. That part of what children have to recognize is sometimes mom or dad are not at their best, and sometimes they're not totally fair. And I often talk with parents about this, and I'm noting, you don't have to engineer times when you blow it. You just have to recognize there are going to be times when you blow it. It's not that I'm proud of the times that I kind of blew it with my kids, but those times were helpful to them as well, particularly to the extent that I was able to acknowledge it and be accountable for it. But also, I've often,
they could see us as fallible.
They can see us as fallible. And I would also point out, and this again, I think is something that maybe generationally hasn't been as clear to a lot of folks in younger generations. I would often say, there were times when I would apologize for how I would use my power as a parent, but I never wanted to apologize for having the power as a parent, because kids need parents to have parental power. And again, it needs to be used responsibly and accountably. And living in the culture that we live in, I would prize for my children that they feel able to object as long as it was respectful, but I never wanted them to feel like they could somehow negate their parents' power, because I think it's important that parents feel empowered vis-a-vis their kids.
Yeah, I mean, you have to have the final word.
Mm-hmm.
And that's just it. And so I just did an episode. So I have a niece. Every episode that ends with a 0, I have my niece back on. And so she is also the oldest of 7. She is the daughter of my only sister. I have 5 brothers. And she's the mother of 2. She's a teacher. She's a gymnastics coach. She's, in the middle of all of these things. Her kids are going into 1st and 2nd grade. And we just did an episode just laughing at all of the crazy stuff that happened with us growing up in a large family. And it's a miracle we are not dead. All the crazy.
My brothers would do it.
Yes. And, having 5 brothers for me, and she's the opposite. There's 2 boys and 5 girls in hers, in my sister's family. But anyway, for me, so boys are more physically aggressive, just naturally. And so for me to try and keep up with all these kids, even though I was the oldest, my sister and I just kind of related to that more physical piece of life. And my mom was very physical as well. And so even though my dad, he has a PhD in electrochemical engineering, and he got that from Berkeley, and then spent, I don't know, a million years teaching at UCLA. And then he went on to BYU until he passed. But my mom was raised by lumberjacks, and we joke around that that's one step up from wolves,
I keep thinking of the Monty Python song.
I know. It's right.
There you are. Yeah. No, so much so. But it's fun. So a lot of times those things that are crazy and maybe a little dangerous or were hard to go through at the time, we were amazed at how, when we look back, those are some of our dearest, most tender memories.
Sure.
Of course. Yeah. Our when we named ours Couples Therapy in 7 words, and the 7 words are: be kind, don't panic, and have faith. And I'm curious, I know faith is something that you've talked about in your work, and I'm curious,
Absolutely.
How do you see the role of faith in parenting? And of course, I define faith in a way that is not necessarily religious, though it's consistent with religious faith. It's not necessarily religious. But I'm curious, how do you see the role of faith in parenting?
Well, and one of the things that I look at when I'm doing my podcast, and even in my life, I have a particular religion that I attend. I'm a part of the congregation. I enjoy that, but I don't promote any specific religion. I look at faith probably a lot like you do, as a recognition of a greater being, higher than us. I am close to the Judeo-Christian values, and that's what I run by. But I just really think that having that faith teaches us so much about who we are and the people we're supposed to be. And so when we talk about grace, grace as a parent is so important. And my dad, bless his heart, his dad was very hard on him, and if they made a mistake, heaven help them all, they would hear about it for a long time, and struggled with letting it go. And so it's funny watching. I remember even being as a kid and watching how my dad behaved when he was around his dad was very different, and thinking, wow, you could see my dad was very worried about appearances and, everything being just right, because he didn't want his dad to be critical of him or what he was doing as a parent or whatever. And so those standings can continue on into adulthood with the adult relationship you have. And so, recognizing that we are held to a higher power, and we are meant to, as we work to draw closer to that benevolent higher power, that we need to be benevolent to those around us. So we need to be involved in service. And now, can you do this without faith? You can. It's just like I say, the best situation, the gold standard for children is to be in a loving home with a caring mom and dad who care about each other. And does that mean that a single parent cannot be successful? No, it doesn't mean that. It's just the gold standard.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, there's certainly a lot of ways in which that it's interesting when you were talking about faith, the idea of whatever God means, and of course, different religions and different systems that wouldn't be called religious think of higher power differently. Thinking of 12-step programs would talk about, they're very careful to say higher power as you understand higher power. But the notion of benevolence, I think, is the key. The way I talk about faith is not necessarily with respect to an understanding of God, although, as I say, it's consistent with an understanding of God, but it's the idea that reality is right to be what it is. That's where benevolence comes from. It's like, even though we can't understand it all because we don't have a God's eye view of the universe, even though we haven't got all the answers, there's something right about the whole project. And that's where a sense of grace and benevolence, I think, comes from, in being in a couple and in being in parenting. That assumption of goodwill follows from that. And I think that's true in parenting as well.
I agree totally. And just learning to be okay with where you are. We spend so much time, well, when the kids get older, we can do this and that. When the kids do this and that, then we can move, and so we're always looking toward what is coming, rather than just soaking yourself in what is right now. Oh, wow. I'm at the grocery store and I've got a 2-year-old or a 3-year-old that's throwing themselves on the floor of the aisle because, they want that chocolate milk or whatever. And I'm not going to get that, or I don't want to get that. And sometimes parents will give in, and they're so worried about maybe what other people are thinking or whatever, instead of saying, wow, I have a child that needs some learning.
Yeah, that's true.
And not worry about, because honestly, I mean, I'm older, and I know that when I walk by in a grocery store and I see a parent dealing with that, I'm not thinking, oh, what a terrible parent. This is,
No.
I'm thinking, oh, sweetheart, this too shall pass. You're doing fine.
I'll teach you a Yiddish word. We're Jewish, I'll teach you a Yiddish word. The Yiddish word is Rachmanus. Rachmanus, which means it's mercy. In other words, you have Rachmanus for the person. It's like, we want God to have Rachmanus for us. It's like, oh yeah, that's how I feel when I see one of those parents.
Yeah. And so, but the parent that's dealing with it is thinking, everyone's thinking I'm a horrible parent, and I gotta shut this kid up. And instead of just saying, wow, I can see you're really upset. And so you can choose to sit here and cry. We can go out in the car and cry. Do you want me to sit next to you on the floor and help you through it? But you're not getting the chocolate milk. I'm not going to give it to you, but it's okay. Because their emotions, especially when they're that young, their inner emotions are just as turbulent and upset as what they're showing.
Oh, yeah.
And if they learn real young that, if I throw a fit and mom gets embarrassed or dad gets embarrassed, I'll get what I want. If I embarrass my parent in front of other people in public, I'm more likely to get what I want because they want me to shut up. And so that manipulation will develop as they get older. But this is where we're teaching them that manipulation either works or it doesn't. And so when I learn that I don't get what I want when I'm screaming and crying and acting inappropriately in public, then I'll want I'm going to quit doing it.
Mm.
And so we're setting ourselves up for failure when we're like, okay, just be quiet and get them what they want. They've learned, ooh, this works. This is good.
Mhm.
Yeah, this is actually a very good segue to our listener letter because it,
Mhm.
it sounds a lot like it. So are you ready for it?
I'm ready.
Okay, so Charlie writes, Dear Bruce and Judy, Maureen and I have been married for 8 years. Maureen is a very carefree person, and I loved that about her when we met because I am definitely more contained. It wasn't a problem before we had children, but now that we have a 4-year-old and a 6-month-old, these differences are quite apparent. We have very different parenting styles, and it's causing a lot of friction between us. Here are some examples. I would like to have the children have a certain bedtime, stay in their beds, and be on a schedule. They need consistency. Maureen believes children should find their inner alarm clocks and go to bed when they want to. That means the older girl, Amy, falls asleep, usually on me or Maureen if we're reading or watching TV, anywhere between 8 to 10 p.m. Amy is no longer capable of going to sleep in her own bed. If I put Amy in her bed, she screams until Maureen takes her out. I feel that we should let her scream for as long as it takes for her to adjust to falling asleep in her own bed. Maureen always breaks down and brings her on the couch to cuddle. Meal times are also becoming a battle zone. Maureen will give Amy dinner. Amy will take a few bites of one thing and ask for something else. I'll tell Amy to eat something else on her plate, to take a few bites of one thing or another. If Amy doesn't like anything on her plate, Maureen will go get something else out of the cabinet or fridge, and she'll keep trying something new until Amy is satisfied. I think this is a recipe for disaster. We're going to have a spoiled brat who feels she can get her way if only she screams enough. Maureen says her method is better because we'll have an independent child who will know what she wants and will be able to make up her own mind and form her own opinions. What should we do?
Well, they could always sign up for some group coaching or
Excuse me.
or one-on-one coaching with me. But
I think so.
but I think that sitting down and having a conversation away from Amy is going to be number one, and recognizing that we do have different standards, and then talking about, for him to say, here's the plus of what I see that you do with Amy. And then have her have an opportunity to say, okay, and here's what I think I see that is good for Amy with this. I think that with bedtime, we could do maybe a compromise because, in fact, I just, it hasn't even aired yet. I did an episode with a lady that does a company called Little Z's, and she actually talks about sleeping and helping kids get to sleep. Kids Amy's age at 4, she needs 10 to 12 hours of sleep every 24 hours. So if she is taking a nap, that could be part of that 10 to 20 or 10 to 24, 10 to 12 hours.
Mhm.
But she still needs to have that time. And she's going to sleep more solidly in her own bed. So what's the compromise? How can we do this? Well, first off, we can start with a routine, and we're going to have pictures and Amy when you're done. So let's say that first we read a story or have a bath or whatever. And then we're going to brush our teeth, and then we're going to brush our hair, and then we're going, and so you have pictures of all of these things. And so that when she's accomplished and at 4 years old, she'll be more interested in something like this. When she's accomplished and you have it Velcroed on something, she can take it off and put it in a bag, an envelope, whatever, to show that it's done and you see what's coming next. That's one thing that you could do. And so now Amy is part of the process of going to bed. Now, if she's used to crying because she wants her mom there, sorry, mom, give up your TV time. You're going to go in the bedroom with Amy And you're going to start, you can read a story, you can listen to some music, you can stroke her hair, you can lie down next to her. And then once she's asleep, you can come out, and then you can ease your way back from that. So it's not going to be, oh, tonight we're changing everything,
Mhm.
because they've trained Amy that she has a control mechanism that works.
Yeah.
And so if we can compromise where Amy is getting that time with her mom, and she's part of the process, that we have a set schedule, and then Amy's getting the sleep that she needs to be functional, because you're going to see, it's funny when I'm coaching parents and they'll say, oh, and they're doing this and this, and they're angry all the time, and they're blah, blah, blah. My first question is, how much sleep are they getting?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. And so then for dinner time, what I would do is just make sure that there is always something on the table that Amy will eat, and they are going to know what that is.
Mm.
And so that whether, you can pick, probably even if it's only maybe 5 or 6 things that we know Amy will eat, then we're going to have one of those things on the table for every dinner, so that mom isn't getting up to make something else. You know what I mean?
Yep.
Mhm.
Certainly do.
And she can have as much as she wants of that one thing. And if that's all she eats, okay, today that's all she eats.
Yeah, it's
But
interesting. Parents will often
ahead.
panic about things. Oh my God, my child is not going to develop properly without having the appropriate balance, and somehow they manage to survive, on
Yeah,
whatever it happens to be.
yeah, it is. And sometimes it's surprisingly, they're good. There's going to be mac and cheese and whatever, but there might also be something that's good for them that they like. Maybe it's strawberries, or maybe it's bananas, or maybe, it's tomatoes.
Yeah.
Yeah, but any of those things, and if you have it on the table already when you sit down, then she can make that choice. You guys are fine with that choice because you offered it with your kids, and then you can not get up, and so it's not like you're catering, you're not running a restaurant,
Mhm.
but then they're going to ease into it. And I promise that when they get older and start going out on dates and all they want to eat is mac and cheese, they'll broaden themselves.
Yeah, that'll take care of itself.
Yes, it will.
It will eventually, but I would just make sure that there's something that we know Amy likes on the table every night for dinner.
Now, it's interesting when, because from a couples therapy perspective, this letter, I'm seeing, well, there's a couple issue here, couples issue. And you actually started to address it a bit when, I'm thinking, how would you coach them? Because you were saying invite, this of course presupposes that Maureen would be willing to talk to someone else also, which maybe she wouldn't, maybe she wouldn't, but you would invite them to really investigate each other's ways of thinking in a respectful way. It's like, well, gee, what are some of the advantages to your approach? Because I tend to take that as sort of an axiom, neither one of them is crazy, neither one of them is cognitively impaired. If they have these ideas, they're not crazy ideas. Some may work better than others. But if you start from that perspective, how did Maureen come by her feelings that it ought to be the way she thinks it ought to be, and how did Charlie? And to invite them to be able to see that, then it sort of loosens up the conflict a little bit. And I'm guessing you probably see this when you're coaching. Do you ever coach couples? Or it sounds like you do, right? You coach.
Yeah, I do. And actually, I think I don't think, I know it is better when I can have both parents coming in. I've even had parents that were divorced and coming in to try and solve, different parenting styles, and how do we do this? And that,
Sure.
my
It's
child
gotta
comes
be-
back from dad's house and she's out of control, or whatever it is. And so I've even had, and I just thought that was a miracle that they were both willing to come and say, what's best for our child? I think maybe at the beginning they were looking for me to say, well, his way's right or her way is right.
Right.
I'm never going to say that. Not going to happen.
That's so important. That's probably even more important, when parents are divorced, to be able to be on the same page.
Well,
That's
yes,
quite a challenge.
because the truth is, if you agreed on everything, you'd still be together.
Well, of
So
course, yeah, yeah. It's sort of normalizing the differences, and of course, I also tend to think it's not like kids are completely thrown by the idea that the rules at mom's house and the rules at dad's house are apt to be a bit different. It's what they need is that it be okay in both places. Do you know what I mean? That
Yeah.
it be okay that it's different without it leading them into something where, the toxic ones are where it turns out they will reject one or the other because they'll shop for the one they like better and the other one won't be supportive. And that can be
Mhm.
really problematic.
Well, and a really easy, well, not easy. It's hard to get the words out sometimes with when you're divorced, because there's just so many other elements that are involved at that point, right?
Yeah.
Sure.
But imagine what it would do to the relationship if you're dropping your child off at their dad's, or you're meeting wherever, however you've got it. And the last thing you say to your child before they take off with the other parent is, I love you, mind your father, or the other way.
Yeah.
I love you, be good to mom.
Mhm.
Imagine what that does, not only for your child, but what that does for that relationship between the divorced people.
Mhm.
You
Yeah,
know, it
I've
softens
seen
up a little
this.
bit.
I've had that occasion actually of working with divorced parents in similar ways, and it's always, I always find it inspiring, when people can do that and actually be supportive of each other. And
Yeah.
it's, you can just see the kids relaxing to some extent.
Sure. And you'll have the children will have such a better outcome
Mhm.
with that than if you have a child that is being thrown back and forth emotionally like a pawn. It's a way to get back at so and so. Oh, your mom remarried, he's not your dad, which we all know he's not, but you don't have to listen to him. You don't have
Mhm.
to. And the truth is, you say, yeah, he's not your dad, I'm your dad, but you need to be respectful
Yeah,
Yeah,
to him.
very
Yeah.
much.
Mm-hmm.
indeed. So are there other things you'd like us to be asking you about?
Oh, well, I think one of the things that we as parents need to really concentrate on is not what's easy for me or what am I used to doing. We always grow up with parents and we say, I will never do that to my kids.
Mhm.
And then we do it.
Oh, we do it, or we do the opposite, which ends up often having the same effect.
Exactly. Oh my
Because we're
gosh.
freaking out about it. Either way, we're freaking out, and freaking out
Right.
tends not to work well. Yeah.
Right. And I've seen parents who have come from very authoritative drill sergeant type parents. I'm not sure if I'm using the right word.
Well,
Authoritarian or
the
authoritative.
buzzword, I can give you this is from, probably 15 or 20 years ago at least, but they used to talk about the three styles being
Mhm.
authoritarian, which is, I think, what you're describing, the sort of,
Mhm.
drill sergeant approach.
Yeah.
Permissive is on the other end, and in between is authoritative, which is sort of
That's
the happy medium.
That's it. That's it.
Yeah.
So we've got the authority. So we've got people who grew up maybe with an authoritarian parent who was the drill sergeant.
Mhm.
Would I say, don't ask questions,
Mhm. Just do what I
and
say.
yeah, because I said so.
Mhm.
Because I'll hit you if you don't.
Mhm.
Yeah,
We've
there's
got
that.
those. And then they grow up and they're like, oh, I'll never be like that. And they become the pendulum swings clear to the other side
Mhm.
and they become extremely permissive, which is just as bad for the kids
Yeah.
as the other. And so it's so important for us to concentrate on what is best for my child, not what do they want, not, what is easy, how am I going to make them love me? You
Mhm.
can't make them love you, but you can have those boundaries. It's important to have those boundaries. So important. We don't do that as a family. But here's some other choices we can make within those boundaries. So offering choices that are reasonable are so important. Just for an example, I'll just use this last year in teaching. My principal was in and she wanted to observe one of the specialists. It was a behavior management specialist, because she was going to evaluate her. And so they asked if they could do it in my class. And I was like, oh yeah, come on in. So I'm sitting there with the principal, and the specialist up is doing her thing. And remember, these last 2 years have been with special needs kids. And I had one little boy, and I think that's too young to put anyone on the spectrum or ADHD or whatever, but he had a diagnosis of being on the spectrum. And so he was sitting by a chart, and the chart was just too much for him he had to play with that and not listen. And it was kind of drawing attention of the other kids. And so I finally just went and sat down next to him, and I said, hey, buddy, I think it's really hard for you to sit by this chart and listen. Can you think, now I'm turning over options to him, right? Can you think of a place that you can sit so that you can listen better? Because this is a lot of fun that they're doing. And he was like, oh, yeah. And so he went, and we had these little sit-upons that the kids would sit on. And so he picked it up, moved, and he was fine the rest of the time. But instead of me going in and saying, you got to quit doing that. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yes, absolutely.
Stop it. I'm going to move you over here.
Yeah.
That would have been a nightmare and not done my specialist much help. It would have actually been intrusive into her thing that she was trying to do. But because, so you can do it, you can give them choices within. And if you've been strong with those boundaries, it gets to a point where they realize that their choices have to be within the boundaries, and they'll make choices that are within those boundaries. But if you come in and say, no, you can't do this, or you can't wear that, or you can't do this, understand that you're taking away opportunities for them to practice making choices within boundaries. Who cares if their socks match? Who cares even if their shoes match? That's kind of a cool thing right now, wearing unmatching shoes.
I haven't seen that one. I've seen the socks one. I hadn't seen the shoes one before. So there we are.
Yeah. The shoes are there. And, I those are things that really don't matter. And so you can let them have within those boundaries. You got to wear shoes to school. Okay, I'm wearing a blue sneaker and a white sneaker. Okay, fine. As long as they're on the right feet, we're good. Let's go. If you live in a cold atmosphere, or in the winters, and they don't want to put a coat on, and that's a big fight in the morning getting them out the door. Night before, throw the coat in the car.
Yeah. That is a classic, actually. That one is like, you let the natural consequences take over. It's like, if you're cold, you put on a coat.
Yeah. But I've seen parents though who, they didn't want to wear a coat, and it's freezing, and these kids and a kid doesn't have a coat. Well, they'll learn. It's like, and they'll get pneumonia. So let's find a happy medium.
It is okay to notice that adults usually are smarter than their kids, and it's okay to take advantage of that on occasion. It's like, the kid's probably going to change their mind. Have the coat.
Yeah, absolutely. So, I think that when we really just sit down and say, is this something that's important for my kid? Does my kid need to learn about conflict? And so what's my involvement in that? It's fun to do a practice night. And kids, when they're 3, 4, 5, whatever years old, they love to just pretend play, right?
Oh, yeah.
And so to have an evening where maybe, you put a tie on the kid and put daddy's shoes on and say, okay, you're daddy, and I'm going to not listen to you. I'm playing with my toys. And let them have kind of a reverse role, or practice. What are some of the things that you can say if, I take a toy from you and you were playing with that? How can we resolve that conflict? And we make it into a fun game time. And then when that actually happens, then that, the chances are greater, not 100%, and the more you play that when they're calm and have, I don't know, game nights or play nights or whatever with your kids when it's not an issue, that when it does become an issue, they're going to start learning to incorporate that. And now you've given them some tools to keep in their, emotional backpack.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Good advice.
Indeed.
Well, thank you, DJ. This has been very helpful and very instructive and very informative for us and for, I hope, our listeners. And I will recommend that Charlie get in touch with you.
And actually, could you tell folks your website again so they get to hear that? And we'll also post that when we post this episode.
Sure. So if you're interested in the coaching and I have other tools that are available, I have some free workshops, stuff like that. It's www.littleheartsacademyusa.com. And then if you want to catch my podcast, it's Imperfect Heroes. And that has a website, imperfectheroespodcast.com. And then you can jump onto whatever platform you like to listen to from there. It's real easy.
Well, great. Well, thank you so much for doing this. And you perhaps you'll be hearing from some folks who heard of you through this.
Well, great. I'd love to have that. And
Thanks
thank you.
a lot.
Well, we hope you enjoyed that interview with DJ. We certainly enjoyed having her on our program and learned quite a bit about parenting and children and their effects on relationships.
Indeed. And especially, the importance of like setting boundaries. And, I'm always saying the importance of not freaking out.
Right.
That's basically
Right.
what it is. Yes. And
which is hard. It's hard not to do, especially if your child is having a fit.
Absolutely. And DJ is yet another of our delightful interviewees that we've had, and we have a few more in the pipeline now.
Yes, we do.
And always looking for interesting folks to interview. And perhaps that is you, listener, or somebody you know. But if it is in fact you yourself, if you have something you think would be good for our program, we would love to have you. Go to our website, which is
ctin7.com.
That's the number 7, ctin7.com. And when you go there, you will see that you can sign up on our schedule to be interviewed. We typically interview folks on Fridays, although this particular one happens to be on a Sunday that we're doing this.
Right.
So we're not restricted to Fridays. But drop us a line. Let us know if you'd like to be on the show, or if you have a suggestion for someone else to be on the show. Or
if you have a question like Charlie had today, please feel free to write either of us, Bruce at ctn7.com or Judy and CT at 7. Judy at ctn7.com, or just go to our website, ctn7.com. And you can pose your question to us.
Indeed, and we are always happy to hear those, and it makes for great stuff to talk about with our guests, and even when we don't have a guest. So another word here for the book that started this whole podcast, which is
Reigniting the Spark, Why Stable Relationships Lose Intimacy and How to Get It Back.
And that book is available anywhere books are sold. So also, please let everybody know about our podcast, of course.
Rate us 5 stars, follow us, share us, all that stuff that people do with social media.
And so until next time,
remember, be kind,
don't panic,
and have faith.